Welcome back to the 278th episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be telling the story of two different EV companies, one that's succeeding, thriving, and one that is slowly dying. And we'll also have an article talking about how the Surgeon General of the United States is trying to implement more changes to protect kids from social media harms. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive. I'm ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling for me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. So, when you heard the news that the Elon Musk train pulled up and he was going to get that huge compensation deal from Tesla, because that is how Elon Musk loves to do things, not conventional, did you say, wow, that's a lot of money. I don't know if he deserves it. Or did you say, oh, well, yeah, he's a bit of a crazy man who does crazy things, brought a lot of money to Tesla. Yeah, he deserves it. Or maybe you had a different one in there. I don't know. There's a lot of range of opinions that you can most definitely have on this subject. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's very emblematic of Elon Musk as a leader, his business style, and also his, I would say his personality. I really want to know what everybody else's opinion is on this one, because I would say that I probably fall in line with most of the Tesla shareholders. I am a Tesla shareholder, so probably should disclose that, of course. I did not actually vote in this shareholder meeting, mainly because I didn't want to do it. I'll be honest, I didn't really care at the end of the day, because the voters aren't going to actually be able to overturn the lawsuit that says that he can't actually get the compensation package. So why? Why would you go in and vote on it for something that's useless? Now, the other things, Delaware to Texas, Delaware has tax breaks. So, but at the end of the day, I didn't concern myself with that vote. So I just wanted to at least get that out there at the very beginning, because I probably should mention that, as I am a person who is I have an interest in Tesla doing well to some degree. Let's be clear, not a huge shareholder. I am a normal, retail investor. So take that as you will. And of course, my opinion is a little bit biased on this one. But that doesn't mean that the story is not interesting, and also that there's not a wider story that needs to be talked about in the EV market here in America. And we'll get into both of those, but let's get to the first article that comes from the New York Post. The headline reads, after Elon Musk's 86 billion pay win, Tesla finance faces judge who called it unfathomable sum. So, for those who were not paying attention, there was a Delaware judge who had a lawsuit put in front of her that said this pay package that Musk was able to get out of the board, where they had very specific incentives in place if he raised the share value by the certain thresholds, which some of them seemed absolutely insane, then he would get a certain amount of compensation. It would mostly come in stock, and he would not get any of it until the end of the deal. And Musk is a person, okay, so I'm going to also draw on the Walter Isaacson book about Elon Musk, as well as the book, I believe, Power Play. I've read both of those, and he is a person who derives, I don't want to say joy, but there's something about being up against the wall, the pressure that he just kind of thrives under, or at least he pretends to, because he just seems to keep taking these risks over and over and over again. And it's obviously worked out for him. He said basically, hey, no, we're not gonna do any of this fancy pay stuff. I'm only gonna get this huge deal. I will put off all the earnings and basically all the major earnings, this compensation package, until I hit X, Y, and Z goals. He hit those goals. So the price of the original deal, I think it would have been at the point of the finishing of all of the incentives, it would have been somewhere around 38 billion. But since the stock price has, risen, fallen, it's kind of fluctuated, but it's gone up since then. It's now around $56 billion because it's not, oh, hey, this is the fixed amount of money that you will get. It's you get these amount of Tesla shares. It will also propel him forward to about a 21% ownership stake, which is one of the reasons that he said this package is really necessary, because he wants to be able to have more control within the company, which is another criticism that the judge leveled. He said, well, okay, the board is basically friends with Elon Musk. He's able to leverage his friendships within the board, even though it is a publicly traded company, in order to get his proposals put forward and to make sure that his plans going forward are the ones that are going to be at least considered more than others. He's not going to let the retail investors and the institutional investors, which the retail investors are about a third of Tesla shareholders. The largest shareholder besides himself, I believe, is Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. All of those companies are in there as well. So this extra chunk, he's at 13% now, going to 21%. So you're looking at a 8% increase in his share or percentage of the total shares. He's going to have more control over the AI aspect of Tesla, which is interesting that he's doing AI at X. He's doing AI at Tesla. I believe he also started another AI company overall. So maybe he'll spin off the divisions from those into that company. He's running solar. He's running a lot of businesses is what I'm getting at. And this larger share of Tesla can, the whole thing that people that are really in favor of this are making an argument about is that he has so many things going on that if you want to guarantee that he is going to pay more attention to the Tesla side of things, then you have to increase his stake in the company. I think that's a pretty rational thing to go out and argue for, but it also comes with the fact that he's going to have even more control, which is another criticism that he's having to face. Like I mentioned, that is the whole idea behind this lawsuit, which is it was not a proposal put forward in the best faith. It was done because Musk has friends on the board rather than because it's the best thing for Tesla moving forward. Now, I would ask this question: is Elon Musk an asset? Is he an asset worth $56 billion? You could go back and forth on that. Now, remember, when this deal was initially put in place, I believe the valuation of Tesla was somewhere around $50 billion. I believe that is the appropriate number. And now Tesla is worth over 1.3 trillion. Okay? So he didn't just 10x the value of Tesla. He didn't just 15x the value of Tesla. He actually a little bit more actually than 20, but 20x basically the value of Tesla. Is he an asset? If he is an asset, could you justify paying this much for it? I don't know. I really don't know. Is the personality, the brand of Elon Musk, who's going to bring in more investors, who's going to have these grand plans that's going to possibly be able to find synergies between his different companies? Is it worth that? Is it worth paying that much money to pull him away from SpaceX, which he has obviously said that some of this money is going to go towards funding SpaceX since it's private? Are all of these things worth it? I can't honestly tell you. But I can tell you that 70-some% of the population or the shareholders of Tesla thought it was, because again, they voted on Thursday and they said, yes, we want this package to go forward. Now, like I said, they're not going to be able to just say, oh, this is the power of democracy. Yes, we're going to overcome the ruling of the judge. No, they're just going to use it as evidence saying, okay, you said that the people weren't fully informed, that this was derived too much from the influence that Elon Musk has on the board. So we put it in front of the people now with all of that context out there, with all of that information out there, and they still voted to get it done. And it could be a very strong piece of evidence in their favor in front of the judge, but also the judge could still say, no, not really feeling it. We're not going to let it happen. So, like I said, at the end of the day, while it is a amazing thing that they put it to the shareholders and they let democracy win out, the ability to vote your shares within the company that you own, it doesn't materially change anything. They still have to face the song of the judge. She's the opera singer, and she is either going to agree and sing beautifully, or it's going to be a ballad or more of a dirge, which will completely kill this deal afterwards. Sorry. Wow, I would just use the word dirge in my podcast. Goodness gracious, what am I? Who am I? Okay, so let's actually jump into some of the comments from the New York Post. Quote, nearly 90% of Tesla shareholders on Thursday voted in favor of the move, leading to Musk to quip on his social media site X that he was sending a cake to Delaware as a parting gift. The post included a image of a vanilla frosted sheet cake with the words Vox Populi Vox Dei. Latin for the voice of the people is the voice of God, written in red letters along with a big heart. In this case, no, it's not the word of God, at least on this issue. Yes, on the other issue, not really. There's a kind of a middleman there that's making sure that that word doesn't get directly up to the big man, or it doesn't get directly handed down as if it's a edict from the big man. No, there's a judge in the way for the compensation deal, but so on. I do think that they highlight something here, which is, or at least they subtly mention, his social media site X. And just like I mentioned before, this is why a lot of people who really want Tesla to succeed, a lot of the shareholders who think that in order to get Elon more invested in the company, to make sure that his time is proportionally spent more on Tesla than on X, which he seems to spend a lot of time on just tweeting nowadays, and at SpaceX, going to Mars. That's the whole idea there with their Falcon Heavy doing its test launch at this point, the restock missions to the International Space Station that they're doing. Also, an article that I just read today about Starlink now deploying across America in just common stores like Walmart, Costco, and I believe Canada, Radio Shack in Mexico, which means that there's going to probably be an influx of people buying it. Therefore, they're going to have lots of more issues to be troubleshooting. So he's going to have to spend some time there, because whether or not we like, and I know I've had this argument with people before that Elon Musk, I made the point that Elon Musk is deeply entrenched and deeply involved in a lot of his companies. And they said to me, well, no, he's really not that special. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. The whole lording him as the savior, which some people tend to do, and I had done that at one point in the past. I won't deny that. I still have an admiration for Elon Musk. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought shares in his company, and I wouldn't have held them, even though the price has fluctuated a lot. The point that I was getting at with this person is he is able to hire very smart people. He is able to push the people, whether they like it or not, to do their best or to leave the company. And he is also a person who is still deeply involved in a lot of the decisions at his companies, whether it be, it may fluctuate from time to time as to which company he's focusing on, but he was deeply integral in the development and the process of putting together all of the heavy rockets, deciding on certain aspects of the design, trying to be there on the ground, testing things, working on the ground multiple days at a time for long sessions with the rest of the engineers. Now, is he there every single second of every single day? Is his job just to be on the manufacturing side or the engineering side? No. But he is still deeply, deeply integrated into all of these companies, and he is participating more than the average CEO actually would. And this is also emblematic of his style, which is he goes 100%. He goes 110%, he goes 140%, 150%. And that is what this compensation is all about in my mind. I think it speaks to the broader American culture. Okay? Tesla is a modern American dream. And yes, for those of you saying, well, he you used seed money from PayPal, and then that money came from his father's emerald business. Okay, so read Isaacson, or just anybody. You can go read the fact check. The emerald thing from his dad is a little bit more contrived than it appears. He actually had lost most of the money by the time it came around. He was living on his aunt's couch in Canada there for a while. That's not necessarily the life of a millionaire who came in. But yes, I would agree with the PayPal thing, which is yes, he made a lot of money from PayPal and then used it as seed money to actually fund Tesla and keep it rolling, because he kind of came in from the outside. He was in there in the founder group, kind of, but there was still some movement in it beforehand. But it's emblematic of a American cultural thing, which is the American dream. Okay, and I think that the other part to it, that's why it's so idealized. That's why Tesla gets so much love. And that's why there's a sort of a patina and a protective bubble around Tesla, its ideas, and so on and so forth. But the more important thing, especially when we're looking at the compensation package, is it is emblematic of taking risks and the risk mentality that Elon Musk had. He would not get paid by the compensation package. He would not get any stock if he did not get Tesla to certain benchmarks. He took all the risk on himself for his own compensation. I'm not saying for the entire company, but for his own compensation, saying, one, believing in himself enough to do it, but two, saying it doesn't matter. I shouldn't get compensated, or I shouldn't get any sort of stock options if I'm not doing anything for the company. It's just like a normal benchmark system, except his benchmarks were absolutely insane. And he was willing to take that risk. And guess what? He put himself into the corner, and whether you like him or not, he came out and did exactly what he said he was going to do. This is the risk mentality that is missing nowadays. This is emblematic of the American dream and how to actually achieve it. You don't just sit back on your laurels. You don't just try to take the safe way. You take a risk, okay? And that's why I think this is extremely, extremely important. This is why I think the compensation package, whether or not the Tesla shareholders were able to get through, whether or not the judge does whatever she's going to do, I think that it should be let through, because this should be a model that is acceptable. If the company can afford to do it, and the asset that the CEO is enough to justify these outrageous sort of plans, if they're able to 20x the value of their company's shares while not completely bankrupting them by just buying assets and just adding on debt so that they can keep expanding like some of these venture capital firms, then we should allow this sort of process to happen, because it provides a incentive system that will keep the CEO involved, that actually puts, how should I say? I don't want to say puts risk first, because as a business, you do have to obviously balance between risk and safety. But at the end of the day, you are going to be constantly risking everything when you're doing your business. Even if you're trying to be safe, you're going to make decisions that are not going to end well for you. And we need to, in America, in my opinion, we need to put back at the center the risk-taking mentality, in that every single time you do a venture, it's risky. Whether you're disrupting a current industry or you are coming in with an entirely new idea, you're taking on financial risk. And that's the one thing about the venture capital industry, which is very, very interesting, because it does increase the risk because the stakes get higher, because more money gets thrown in, but also it lowers your risk to some degree, because it's not solely funded by you anymore. It's not you and your family just throwing in money trying to make the company succeed. Now it's just other people's money who just keep boosting the paper value of your company over time, and they just go out and do another round of fundraising every single time you need money. So it actually kind of detaches the system, the investment system, the growth of the company, the risk assessment and incentives. It attaches them from one another, and it changes the math a little bit. And I think a package like this is emblematic of what we could do, or what could be a broader trend that could actually focus that back at the center of American business. But also in general, I think we have a safety culture nowadays. I have ranted about this multiple times, especially to people that I deeply care about. And maybe we need to be willing to take on more risks. But then again, as you become an entrenched power across the world, as your economy becomes a little bit more stagnant, just like Britain throughout the 50s, 60s, you become more about saving what you have than taking on the risk to develop more. And maybe that's just the phase and cycle that we're in here in America. There will obviously still be those people pushing the boundaries and trying new things out, but we may not be in a place where everybody wants to take on such risks. But like I said, there are still those companies that want to go out there, that want to try something new. Your Teslas, or the ones that want to do something a little bit different or follow the model put out there by companies like Tesla. And the next company that we're going to talk about is it's really emblematic of that. It is Fisker. So for those of you who were not aware, Fisker actually filed for bankruptcy. The headline from the Wall Street Journal reads, "Electric vehicle startup Fisker files for bankruptcy." Look at that. It's almost as if I read it right off the page. So I will also say that I did have shares in Fisker as well. I sold them a while ago. I don't remember if I actually made a profit or if I broke even. I think I bought when they were higher and lost money for sure. And then I think I bought back in as they lowered, and then they rebounded for a little bit. And I was like, okay, I've hit even. Let's get out. I am very happy that I got out now that I'm looking at the share price and looking at the fact that they are filing for bankruptcy. But this is the alternative story. The first story was of an EV company going out and taking the risks and actually succeeding. Maybe it's because of the first mover advantage. Maybe it's because they have a CEO who's willing to do things crazy. Maybe it's because they're willing to actually invest here in America, even though they do some battery acquisition from places in China. There's no doubt about that. They're also building their own batteries. They're willing to take risks when it comes to solidifying their supply chain, building a lot of things themselves. But that all comes with scale, and Fisker didn't quite have that. So to say that, oh, well, that's the main reason, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. Fisker did not reach the point where they actually could do that yet. And they also relaunched, because yes, this is the second time that Fisker has launched. They, which I thought this is the second time that they've gone into some sort of bankruptcy or dissolved the company. So obviously it's not going very, very well for our gentlemen over at Fisker Motors. I'll just read the second and third paragraph very quickly. Quote, "The filing marks the second time an automotive venture by car designer Henrik Fisker has gone bust and follows weeks of quietly winding down its operations. The 7-year-old California-based company sought a cheaper and faster entry into the auto industry by outsourcing manufacturing, but struggled with the complexities of running a publicly held company." And that's another aspect to it for sure, which is you have lots of different shareholders who you're trying to placate. You're basically at the whims of the fundraising that you can do on the public market. If there's bad news, if there's anything like a bad review that comes out about the software, which is a major thing with Fisker, then that can actually tank the value of your company, or at least it can hurt it for sure. And then it becomes harder to go to investors and say, hey, look, our stock price is just going up and up and up. Look at that. Look at that. Come on, bring in some more money. Bring it my way. It's hard to make that argument when your stock price is going down, when your sales are not amazing. I believe that they had about 10,000 cars in inventory, and they were only able to offload around, 4,900 of them to customers. So why is this story any different? There's two reasons that this story is any different. One, they didn't take on as much risk. The Fisker actually wanted to be able to buy stock parts. They wanted to be able to do deals with normal manufacturers or with the people who are already making certain products and then go forward and make a car out of that. Which, hey, some companies do that. There are stock parts and they kind of construct things around it. Some make their own parts because they have an R&D department. Fisker didn't have that. Even Tesla did start that way. They actually went to Lotus to help make the first Roadster, and then they ended up doing a lot of the process themselves, or at least when it came to some of the manufacturing, they did a little bit more themselves towards the latter half, and then they built out their facilities from there. So were they trying to follow the exact same model? Close, but not exactly, because they were trying to do this for all of their cars. It seemed to be the way they wanted to keep going forward because they wanted to make a joint manufacturing deal with certain car companies as well. So I feel as though they were not willing to push the boundary as much. Now, does that mean that that is the absolute failure? No, of course, there are other elements here at play, which was Fisker's last summer started delivering its first electric model, the Ocean SUV, just as the previously hot market for battery-powered vehicles was starting to cool and signs were emerging that consumer demand for EVs was shallower than expected. So that's a quote directly from the Wall Street Journal that says, yeah, no, they also had just really bad timing. So there are lots of elements here, but I do believe, and this is just me, and maybe it's because I'm biased, but I do believe that this venture was a soft-footed attempt in order to step into the EV world. And I don't necessarily want to pretend that it's all about risk, that the risk mentality is all that matters, because that's how I framed it. And I do think it's a very, very important thing in the success of Tesla. But that doesn't mean that it's everything. There's no doubt about that. But I do believe that they were moving too cautiously here. They also went public too early, which is extremely, extremely hard. At least Tesla had 7 years behind it before it went public. And also, it was the first to do it. So when you're the first to do it and you've set the standard and the software is amazing, the product is, there are some quality issues going across all the Teslas. We've seen that with the panel gaps on the Cybertruck or even on other cars. So there's no doubt about that the quality isn't 100% there. But when you release your first car, which the Roadster got rave reviews versus the Ocean that they released as an SUV back in the day, they did release the Karma, which was like a plug-in hybrid, but the new structuring of Fisker, they released the Ocean and it didn't get amazing reviews. If you're not going to have a banger straight out of the gate, especially as the market's starting to cool, your value proposition to the customer isn't, the value proposition they had is, hey, we are selling it for $40,000, but we're not selling it at a profit of $40,000, which is, how most EVs are. Tesla only really broke profitability within the last 4 years after 20 practically at this point of 22, 23 of being in operation. So, it takes a while to get there. And the larger car manufacturers who are going into EVs, they can sink some of the costs. Ford is sinking costs on almost every single Ford Lightning that they are putting out there until they're able to get the manufacturing costs down. So it's also just a rough market to go into. There is no doubt about that. But I thought it was interesting. I wanted to have the dual stories here. One company that succeeded, one company who was also founded, the original Fisker was founded, I believe, in 2003, but I could be wrong about that. But they were in the game very early, and they didn't actually end up panning out, the initial Karma. And Fisker, the actual gentleman, Henrik, I believe, yes, was so passionate that he wanted to do it again. And I believed in that vision there for a little bit, but it didn't end up panning out for him. So, but that's enough on the two stories, the two different paths that these EV companies or EV companies in general could take. And there are plenty more out there. There's no doubt about that. But I'd be interested, now that you have a little bit more of the context, are you sitting here saying that Tesla made the right move with its package? That obviously Elon Musk is actually an asset? Or are you sitting here like, well, no, it's actually a rough market. We're seeing this with Fisker, how their sales have cooled. Maybe they shouldn't at this time be giving out that much money. I think that'd be a totally warranted perspective to have, especially with the article that we just read to you, because obviously EVs are struggling a little bit, or at least the demand for them is falling. So is that the best time to be issuing a huge package? Most shareholders in Tesla would not agree with you, but you are very warranted to have that opinion. So let's jump to our final article. It's going to be a very quick one. It comes from the Daily Beast, and the headline reads, Surgeon General calls for cigarette-style warnings on social media platforms to protect kids. And I'll be honest, Vivek Murthy, I have not agreed with everything that he has said, but his push to try to really rein in, or at least talk about the health issues that come from social media, I'm right there with him. I think that while I don't want the government to, creep and be able to just constantly say, hey, well, it's a health risk, so we need to regulate this. We need to be more involved here. Da 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 da. I don't want that to be the case. There's no doubt about that. I don't like executive branches exerting too much control. But I do like when they use their ability and their power to extract research and actually do the job that they are meant to do, which is to actually, okay, that's a little bit contrived. It's not always that their job is to do this, but as an executive agency to do research, to spend our taxpayer dollars to go out there and find out what some of these issues are, see what possible solutions would be, I would be fine with, Surgeon General having a little bit of funds to really do some health how to put it? I don't want to say experiments because that sounds really bad. I don't want to experiment. Never mind. I'm not even going to say the sentence because I don't want to get it clipped out of context for any reason. But I would want the money that we give to the Surgeon General and taxpayer funds to go into possible research about this, to understand the effects of social media on kids and the health risks that come along with it, and also to put forward policy proposals. Not to actually put forward rules and regulations, but rather put forward policy proposals to Congress, because they also could do this themselves. Maybe we could even have a joint task force between the executive branch and the legislative branch that brings those two agencies together and say, okay, so if we were to legislate something, how would the executive actually be able to enforce it through the Surgeon General's office? I think all of those things that, if we could do it in tandem like that, that'd be great. I'm always weary of more intervention by the government in social media companies, or just companies in general. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean the essence of what they're saying is not important here, which is there has to be some extra layer of resistance to these social media companies. And honestly, I think what the government's doing here is trying to peddle some of its soft power by saying, hey, we would think this is a really important thing and we would be willing to legislate on it. And the social media companies pick up on it like, oh, okay, that's where they want us to go. Okay, they're kind of signaling what we need to do so that we don't come under fire. Or maybe they're a little bit more explicit, like Elizabeth Warren in some of those hearings back in the day. If you do not regulate yourselves, we will regulate you, basically. That's not an exact quote. It's go look up the clip. She sounds very angry while doing it. But I think they got the message loud and clear that, hey, we need to fall in line. Otherwise, they will make the decisions, not us. Even though some of these companies, aka Facebook, if you remember those ads from 2 or 3 years ago, they're begging for the government to regulate them. They're begging for the government to set the groundwork so that they don't have to be the ones responsible for it. And the reason why is because if the government the government says, hey, you need to take all the efforts you can in order to, in a really casual way, I'm not saying with legislation, to protect the health of young users. And then Facebook takes that their own way, and they still do things that are trying to put making money at the forefront, which is their job, of course, and they know about some of the knock-on effects that could hurt users, then the liability is fully on them. Versus if the government says, hey, this is what you have to do to be in compliance, and some other effects are still knock-on, they can say, at least in the public relations game, they can say, oh, well, we're just following the government's rules. You should take it up with the government to fix this. So you can see how they're actually just trying to shift the blame a little bit, or at least Facebook, especially. That's what I was laughing whenever I heard those campaigns. Oh, well, yeah, the Facebook wants to be involved in the new internet. I'm like, guys, come on. Either lead the way or let the government use you as a little puppet branch, okay? Otherwise, I don't know why you're still here. I honestly don't. You were a bleeding edge company for a long time. You were the one basically making ad infrastructure. You were the one that made it possible for all these different ad companies to truly thrive and to actually establish, besides Google, this ad centric view of the internet, this ad centric, how should I put it, world that we live in nowadays. Yeah, at Facebook, you guys were the ones that really able to harness the data of people and make targeted ads, and you were leading the way on that. But now that it is a little bit risky, maybe that's why I put that in there. Maybe that's why I added it. Maybe it was a subconscious decision. But now that things are getting a little bit risky and they're not necessarily all upside, you're starting to peel back a little bit. You're trying to make sure that your entrenched power stays entrenched. Just an interesting observation. So I think that at the end of the day, this at least public service announcement that this is something that social media companies should consider and people should push them to do, I think that's great. If it turns out to just be rules and regulations and more restrictions, the companies will use that as an attempt to, one, say that, hey, we're not culpable, but also to bludgeon other companies that are coming up that can't necessarily put in these sort of warnings or necessarily not harness certain types of data, which would be unethical to do it on kids anyway. But my point being that this is going to benefit, if it's rules and regulations and if it's structured particular ways, it's going to benefit the incumbents rather than people that are trying to emerge into these markets and really try to push the boundaries. So, which is the case with lots of different regulations. A lot of capture happens at the regulation level. So, but that's a conversation for another day. Sorry, I'm going a little bit too long there. So let's jump into our daily delight. And this story comes from Yahoo News. Headline reads, "Clever birds outsmarts cat. Refuses to go down easy." And I'll be honest, when I first saw this, I was like, what the heck is... Well, I saw like a little blue contrast, a blue outline sitting against the fur of the cat. I was like, what is going on here? What is this? And then they have an arrow that points to it, and it made me really think, oh, that's the bird. Oh, okay. So the bird is sitting underneath the scruff of the cat's neck. In the video, the cat starts backing up like, whoa, I feel this on my neck. What are you doing? What are you doing, man? And I'll tell you, it is absolutely hilarious. If you want to see the video, it's attached in the article, or you want to read about this cat and bird doing their little dance together, or you want to read any of today's articles, there are the links in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, as well as Podvine, and the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. A little bit more free form, a little bit just topics that I've been reading about, I've been thinking about. The last one was about the big man theory of history, based off of, at least drawn a lot from or inspired by the conversation that Leo Tolstoy has throughout War and Peace, his book. So, with all that said, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Daily Flip podcast. And all of that out of the way, all of that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.